Are Ethiopians black? Are people from Somalia black? Are people from Eritrea black? Folks, the reason why I'm asking is because it's Black History Month, and I have been doing my best to recognize and to celebrate Black excellence wherever it has existed or does exist in the world. And I did a video last week on the Empire of Aksum. You probably saw it. Some of you may have seen it. If you haven't seen it, go back and look at it. But I got some pushback from a brother from Ethiopia who said to me in a very angry and dismissive way, Ethiopians are not black. So it concerned me on different levels, but let me say this before I discuss my issues with what was said. Let me say that people have the right to define themselves as they see fit. Each ethnic group has that God-given right, so I don't disparage the fact that one particular group, one particular ethnic group wants to see itself one way or another. That's not my concern. My concern was what motivated this angry response. And this is why I'm doing this post. Maybe some of you can tell me why a people who clearly have thousands and thousands of years of lineage in Africa, on the continent of Africa, would be insistent upon saying that they are not black. I think that there's a much deeper issue here. So first of all, let's talk about who's black. What is blackness? Well, blackness is not just people in Africa. We can all agree upon that. But let me tell you further that blackness is not just those who have been shipped as a result of slavery to distant places like the Caribbeans, like North America, South America, or even certain parts of Europe. Blackness is much more expansive than that. Because in one sense, archaeologists and paleontologists and genetic scientists tell us that we are all black. Modern human beings began to migrate from the continent of Africa roughly 70,000 years ago. And so where they went first is across the Arabian Peninsula, and then they went into Eurasia, and then ultimately they made it into Europe. So we are all black. So I don't see why there's this stigma associated with black, even though I think I know what this is about, and I want to discuss it and more in further detail in just a moment. But not only that, genetic scientists have done a pretty good job of mapping out genetic families that they refer to as haplogroups. And if you know anything about haplogroups, each distinct ethnic group has a particular letter of the alphabet that signifies that link, or that haplogroup's origin is in that particular continent. So for the people of what we refer to as sub-Saharan Africa, the letter of the alphabet, the haplogroup that is associated most commonly with people of African descent is the letter E. So in my case, if you look at my DNA map, you'll see that I am an EM2. Most African Americans that live in the United States are EM2s. We are EM2s. But what I want to now talk about is the fact that Ethiopians, they're not EM2s, but they're EB1s and EB3s. E being the fact that means that their lineage, however far back you want to go, is African. So I guess the real question is not who's black, but ultimately who's African. And as I've said, scientifically, we are all black. We are all Africans in the broadest sense of the term. But as it relates to the people from Eritrea and Ethiopia, the scientific evidence, the objective evidence is that we are more closely related, me being a black man with an E haplogroup and you being a Ethiopian man or woman or Eritrean man or woman with an E haplogroup as well. We all come from Africa more recently than everyone else. Let me move on to talk about that even further, visit that. So look, like I said, it's not just about black people who are the descendants of slaves. When people left Africa, 70,000 years ago, they went to distant places, but remarkably, they remained African looking, black looking, what we would consider to be African American today in their features. For example, if you look at some of the people who are from Polynesia that are referred to as Micronesia, which means the Black Islands, by the way, I don't know if you know, Micronesia means the Black Islands. You look at their images, you see, wow, you think you're looking at someone from around the corner. If you look at some of the people who are from India, the people who are referred to as the Dravidians, again, you'd think that you're looking at someone who grew up with you in your neighborhood, clear, strong African features, not much of anything else. It's clear. Maybe the texture and the length of the hair is a tell, but otherwise, these people look quite African. If you look at the first people who peopled and populated the Hawaiian Islands, the queen of Hawaii, the first and only queen of Hawaii, if you look at her, she has very distinct African features. If you look at the Negritos, and I'm not trying to be inappropriate, but that was the term that they referred to in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. If you look at the Negritos from the Philippines, you'll see very distinct African features. And these are not people who married or interacted with African Americans from the United States doing military service. These are people who were living in those Philippine islands for hundreds and perhaps even thousands of years. So it's important to understand that Blackness is far more expansive than we want to assign it. So another thing that I want to say to my brothers and sisters, and I want to raise this question because I seek to understand, not to criticize. But the other question that I want to raise to my African brothers and sisters, particularly my Ethiopian brothers and my Eritrean brothers and my Somalian brothers and sisters. But before I do that, I want to say that not all Ethiopians say they're not Black. But this particular gentleman and a few others, when they were responding to my Oxamite video, decried it and said that it's not about Blackness. It doesn't have anything to do with Black people. So here's the much larger question. Why do some Black people, or let's say this, people of African origin, want to distance themselves from Blackness? I think the answer is known to us. It's troubling, but it is known to us. And it simply deals with the hegemonic structure of the West. And what I mean by the hegemonic structure, I mean that when the Western colonizers went into different places, whether it was India or whether it was the west coast of Africa or the east coast of Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, or the Congos on the southwest side of Africa, they set up a racial hierarchy. And in a word, if you were white, you were right. If you were Black, you're whack. And so that may seem simplistic and that may seem comical, but the reality is that structure still holds substantially today. So then when people who are immigrants come into the United States, or when they might immigrate to Canada or to Great Britain, they quickly size that up and they see that Black people, for all the overcoming that we've done, for all of the laws that we've passed, have not overcome. And in terms of the hegemonic structure, we're at the bottom. White people, people of European origin and descent, are at the top. And it makes sense practically. Who wants to be associated with the group at the bottom? And that's just practicality. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm not saying that I excuse it. I'm saying that I understand it. That at the end of the day, even people from Africa don't want to be associated with being Black. But friends, let me suggest to you, by the genetic information that I've shared so far, the haplogroups, you are Black. Do you know, and I'm speaking to my Ethiopian brothers and sisters, the origin of the name Ethiopia, where it actually comes from? It is a term of Greek origin, somewhere around 450 BCE. They created it. They didn't mean to be demeaning. They meant to be descriptive, but they referred to people that lived in Africa as the burnt face people. And that is what Ethiopia or Ethiopian means. So then it's striking to me, it's confusing to me for people to say, I'm Ethiopian, but I'm not black. I'm burnt face, I'm dark skinned, but I'm not black. On another level, I will say this. If you don't want to be black, you're not black. Because it is, to some large degree, how one sees himself or herself. The last thing I want to say about this is that whether you consider yourself black or Semitic, which actually is a language group, not a people group, but if you are Ethiopian, or if you're Somalian, if you are from Djibouti, if you're from Eritrea, you need to understand that in the United States, the people in the United States, I mean the non-black people, regard you to be black. And let me tell you that from a official position. If you look at the 2020 census and you see the makeup of the black population, which is there's a separate file for that in the census study that was done in 2020. They break down who's black, and they break it down to people from other countries. And inside of the black family, inside of the black file, is a discussion about people from Ethiopia, and people from Eritrea, and people from Somalia. So even if you think you're not black, everyone else does. And that means that it has an effect on you. And that means that perhaps we should work together shoulder to shoulder, because blackness is something that can be a burden and has been a burden, but it can also be a blessing and a benefit if we choose to celebrate each other and support each other instead of distancing ourselves from each other, so that maybe some of us can get some privilege and some benefit and some splash off in a European-dominated hegemonic structure. Well, I might be preaching a little bit tonight, I'm sorry, but I'm concerned. I think that we are still falling prey to an attitude, to a mindset that has enslaved us well beyond the period of our physical chains falling off. I say celebrate everything that's black, everything that is African. And I say we are all, and I mean all humanity is African. We are like one elementary age student put it this way. We are like M&Ms. We are many colors on the outside, but we are all chocolate, as in African, on the inside. Let's celebrate Black History Month together, not divided.